delighted to be invited to participate in what I consider to be a game changer event. It's also great to be speaking right after one of our alumnus from the college. So that's very gratifying. I was waiting to see him say a little box saying, you know, one of these elements of the success was education in St. Lucia. Obviously, it was, and evidently so. Yes. I need to tell him that we've changed our logo so he can update his slide. I've spoken on the issue of innovation so many times, in so many places. And before coming to St. Lucia to pick up this job, I was working at the OECD in Paris, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and running their unit for structural policies and innovation. And over the last several months, I've been working on the innovation plans for different countries. Dominican Republic was the portfolio I worked on the most in that time, but we were also working on Egypt and Shenzhen in China. So not for all of China, but Shenzhen. But Shenzhen is like equivalent to all of the developing world multiplied by 10 in terms of the quantum of innovation. And 40, 50 years ago, it was a small fishing village with a very small population. What is it I'm trying to share? Much of what we're discussing today is actually nation innovation, which needs to be distinguished from talking about innovators, which is having innovative people per se, or innovative individuals, or innovative firms. It's about talking about an ecosystem that generates innovators and innovative firms, and so on. In effect, it's a discussion about a governance structure, what I call innovation governance. So every society has innovators, innovative firms, and so on. What really matters is the quantum and the speed, and so on. So for example, is your innovation level low or high? Is it slow or fast? Is it ad hoc or is it structured? Is it fragmented or is it organized? And then lastly, is it undocumented or is it documented? Well, one of the things with innovation, especially in a developing country context, is the latter. There tends to be no data and no information on the level of innovation. So if you go and you do some research on St. Lucia in terms of innovation, you would be hard-pressed to find good quality information that can be benchmarked against other countries in the world. And that applies to most countries in the Caribbean. So for example, the only country in the Caribbean that generates consistent data on R&D expenditures as a share of GDP is Trinidad and Tobago, my home country. And for the last 20 years or so, the expenditure of Trinidad and Tobago on research and development has been 0.05% of GDP, and consistently so. So, and this is an oil-rich hydrocarbon economy that has no shortage of resources in relative terms. So most Caribbean countries fall probably way below that. The expenditure level for R&D as a share of GDP that is recommended for a developing country to progress in the world is 1% of GDP. Most developing countries that are doing well, or if you could call them developing countries anymore, are spending 2 or 3 times that, meaning they're spending 2, 3, even as much as 5% of their GDP on research and development. So a country like Trinidad and Tobago is spending less than a quarter, less than 10% of what it should be spending to do well. Far more to be globally competitive. That means that if we look at a country like St. Lucia or any other Caribbean country, we are severely underinvesting in research and development. And so if it is we are actually interested in making a quantum leap forward, then we need to change the discussion. Because the debate we're having is an interesting one, a very useful one. But as I always said, and I said that my good friend, the girl Louisette, when we were stepping out the room for lunch, where is the money? Because ultimately, it comes down to resources, human resources, but also financial resources. So just a week ago, I made a presentation to the ministers of education of the OECS. We had a discussion about tertiary education in the OECS territories. So the night before, I said, okay, let me see if I could find some data, because I do research on innovation. And so I collected the data from the World Bank on expenditure on tertiary education as a share of government expenditure on education. Right? So this is how much you're spending on tertiary relative to how much you're spending on education. The average for the Latin America and the Caribbean is about 20%, almost 21%. The OECS average is 8%. St. Lucia's average over a number of years is 5%. So St. Lucia is below the OECS average, and it is operating at 1/3 of the average for Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, I'm not even comparing Latin America and the Caribbean with some of the Asian countries, because if you compare Latin America and the Caribbean with Asian countries, which are the countries that we have to compete with, we are probably, as a region, 1/3, if not a quarter, of what they are spending on research and development. So, where do we go from here? Well, the first thing that we have to do is, first of all, develop the data infrastructure on what it is we are doing and what we are spending our resources on, and estimate what is the economic impact or the return on that investment. So there are those who argue that we spend a lot on education, and in some respects we do, 5 to 6% of our GDP, in most instances across the region, if not higher. But several of our presenters, including my colleague, Dr. Felix, lamented the quality of our educational experience. Having 2 teenagers of my own, I can tell you that, yes, we are stifling innovation in our children, and we do it in a very systematic and a very systemic way. In fact, our education system is actually designed to do so, to snuff out the creativity and innovation in our children, because children are supposed to be quiet, well-behaved, and so on. And there's a gender dimension to it as well, particularly targeted at boys. And I gave the feature address at several years ago in Barbados when I was working there at the Barbados Secondary School Association's conference, and I was asked to talk about masculinities. So when I was finished, 3 teachers came up to me, female teachers, of course, because over 90%, in fact, probably 98% of our teachers are female at the primary and secondary school. And they said something to me that I've never forgotten. They said, you know, we treat boys like bad behaved girls. Because they don't sit still. They come into the classroom very sweaty very often, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So, our school systems are actually designed to temper all of that. And so, the result that we get are really people who cannot think out of the box. Those who are able to get out of the box are the people that we've seen on the screens all day long. They are the exception to the rule. But it is these exceptions that prove the rule, which is that institutionally, we are starving ourselves of innovation. So, let's end now to say that at the college, we have an uphill task as well, which is that if you compare the St. Louis Community College with some of its comparators, even competitors, our share of PhD staff, people who have actually been trained to do research at a higher level, is low. It's at 8%. At the University of Guyana, it's 16% of their staff have PhDs. And at UWI, where I used to work, 80% of their staff have PhDs. And so, the quantum leap that is required to move to become an innovation nation is very significant. And the resources that are required to make that leap need to be prepared and organized in a very structured, organized way. There's a way to do it, and I think we have the capabilities, but we have to be clear by setting benchmarks, targets, with all the required metrics. So beyond this very august meeting and the exceptional presentations, I think we need to set ourselves a very, very simple but specific task, which is to say, let us document where we are at now. And let us identify where we would like to be in 10 years from now and or 20 years from now. And in which specific sectors do we consider it to be a priority? So I saw the presentation on apiculture yesterday and again today. I think that's an excellent area. Some areas of the blue economy. Of course, we have to do agri-tech areas. And of course, we have to catch up with fintech, medtech, digital technologies, and so on. But you can't do everything in a small place. You have to figure out where you can make a difference in terms of your export capabilities, but also in terms of employment generation. And so that's what I would like to offer. At the college, we can help the government of St. Lucia and all the key stakeholders come up with a very specific innovation plan. I've been doing this for several years. I've just done it for Dominican Republic. I'm working on Egypt. I've worked on China. We can pull together a team to prevent. And that's what I'd like to offer. We are doing other things. We have just set up an e-learning academy. We're just about to establish, thanks to help from several stakeholders in St. Lucia and outside of St. Lucia, to set up an innovation lab and a startup center. We are also working on an upskilling academy with the private sector. And last but not least, we are working on establishing a digital and creative academy, which is one of my pet areas of research. Thank you very much for your kind attention.